We open up on, okay.
Where do we go?
Are we live? Okay,
Live.
I'm going to reintroduce real quick, and then I want Brett to continue with what he was saying.
Part two.
Yes.
Oh,
we're
I
at
see part two. Okay. Part two.
Thank you, and welcome to part 2 of our live stream today with our friend, author, researcher, and speaker, Brett Lee Thomas. This is Lisa George. I'm joined here by my husband, Noble George. And thank you guys for all being so patient, and hopefully everyone found this new stream and are joining us here to hear what Brett was sharing when we got cut off. And Brett, he already shared his contact information with us. Maybe as soon as we have about 10 minutes till break, so maybe after the break you can share that again, Brett.
Okay.
But please continue with what you were just sharing before we got cut off, Brett.
Okay. What I was believing, and again, according to the research, what I found is just it's either one way or another in this world. There's no real neutralities. There's no real organic, homegrown, natural deities of the earth, etc. in my research. Okay. And the reason I say that is because I see that it seems one way or the other. It seems that the morals that you follow, what you research, the books that you read, the ancient texts, it either points you towards a direction of something godly, or it points you in the direction eventually towards something of this earth. Okay, something worldly, whatever. That's why the Bible speaks out against anything that's worldly. Even the heart. Okay, the heart is like your physical body. It's like your worldly body. Even that, the Bible calls it desperately wicked. So it's either going in one way or another, and that's what I believe in this pagan religion, is that it's the same way. Okay, Cain and the serpent are the ones I believe that actually ended up starting it, and I also believe that it actually began. I believe the point of inception for the pagan religion started in the Garden of Eden when the serpent was talking to Eve and convinced her to think, yeah, you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. Okay, there's the beginning of reincarnation, if you think about it, because he's saying you don't have to actually go to God for your salvation and for your divine element, or whatever you might call it, is up in heaven. It's basically you can do it on your own. Okay, you are gonna be wise enough if you just keep going and follow my way, and you will eventually be a god. So there you go. That's the beginning in a more theological realm, and the theological meaning is that's the beginning of the pagan religion right there. Okay, so that's where Cain and his father, the serpent, manifested and jumped on it to make it even more of an actual belief system now, rather than just hypothetical. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a great way to explain that. Perfect. Okay. Please continue.
So again, I don't believe that it's just this whole concept of, one way or the other, godly way or the opposite way, is so cut and dry, because the enemy does not want to make it cut and dry. They want to make it smoke and mirrors. They want to cloud it a lot. That's how seduction and temptation work. Okay, they don't give you all the facts. They give you a little bit to draw you in, and they might even, as we'll see in the future, a lot of times it'll sound godly. It'll sound Christ-like, antichrist. It'll be close to Christ, but not quite. And that's another way they drag you in. They drag you in by your thoughts of, oh, I'm doing good. Oh, I'm doing something right. Hitler thought he was doing something right. Mao thought he was doing something right. These people look at their own humanistic interpretations of what is right and wrong, and they think they're doing right. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's what happens when you get subjective. You don't, and that's what paganism is. It's basically, in its essentials, is I think Aleister Crowley says, do whatever you want, do what you wilt, right?
Right.
And in modern witchcraft, it says, as long as you don't harm, no harm no one, do what you will. So it's basically do whatever your humanistic and your human mind thinks is correct or right. That's basically the opposite. It's a worldly thing.
Yeah, that comes down to, it's like the doctrine of fallen angels, basically, as opposed to the doctrine of the Most High, And
Mhm.
of course, the fallen angels are they want to lead us all astray. They don't want us. They want us worshiping them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the essence of pride. And again, that's the thing that the serpent and Satan himself, they were both known for. Lucifer, known for their pride, because again, instead of saying that, okay, I'm a child of God, God is the number one, they're going to try to twist it around saying that they are. So that is the essential. So that's, again, pagan religion, again, is directing people's worship from the true God in heaven to them or to someone else. Like you said, fallen angels or these gods of their own invention.
Yes. Yeah. It's interesting, Brett. For some reason, I just flashed back to the last Ask Me Anything I did with Gary Wayne. I think you met him at the conference, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think Gary
Gary's
Wayne.
such a nice guy.
Yeah. Well, so are you. You guys are both
Oh,
really good and both thoroughly researched, I'll add too. But Gary was talking about very similar things as you were in our last Ask Me Anything, and it got my attention because, with my own research I've been doing on the royals, the European royals, those who have been given what we call the divine right to rule by their ancestors, the fallen angels. Because otherwise, how do you explain how these people just have this royal blood for generations and generations? And Gary breaks it down really well too. He's got like genealogies from all these different family lines and the Templar bloodlines and Merovingians. I mean, they're all different names, but they're all part of the offspring of Cain and the fallen angels, of course. So that's where they get that so-called divine right to rule, where they just feel that they're the epitome of an entitled person, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, again, they must have some kind of angelic DNA somewhere because so they feel they should take advantage of it. Okay, we'll talk back after.
Okay, break. Get something to eat and drink, guys. We'll see you in a few minutes.
We'll be right back.
Your partnership with Sacred. As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased, as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com. Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed,
Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
Become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
For 1 second that the Capitol will ever treat us fairly, you are lying to yourselves. Because we know who they are and what they do. This is what they do, and we must fight back. You can torture us and bomb us. Fire is catching. And if we burn, you burn with us.
Are you awake yet? I hope. We've tried and we've tried for years and years to use passive resistance and loud voices to make a change. The time is over. Your governments around the world have no other goal than to decimate your entire existence at the hands of the bankers and the elites. The war is coming, and it's your choice to decide if you want to be a warrior or a victim. Denial is not a choice anymore. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the planet. Not giving up. Revolution Radio. All right. Thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
Hey, shalom, everybody. We are back again after break. Thank you guys for all coming over from the other stream. I see almost everybody was here. That's awesome. This is Lisa George, your host. We are in second hour here. Noble, my husband, and I are filling in for Zen Garcia, and we are joined by our friend, author, researcher, and speaker, Brett Lee Thomas. Brett, are you there, brother?
I am here. Hi, everyone.
Okay. All right, we kind of got cut off at the end a little bit. We were talking about the divine right to rule. And so if you want to continue on that, or if you want to go into another part of this chapter here, whatever you
Okay.
feel like doing.
I'm gonna continue on. I try to rapid fire some of these things as far as what I've found as far as now more beyond Abel. Okay, I did talk about again the desire for paganism to actually supplant Adam as the father God, because again, he had his problems according to them. He followed God. He couldn't be that good. So, another reason why that things aren't as cut and dry as you seem, because again, is because the other side wants to, it would be too simple to just see one side or the other, right? They have to kind of obscure things and a little bit to make it look, again, to seduce you in, because again, it's almost like, following God and doing right as a human being. It's almost a no-brainer, I mean, you want to help people on the street, you want to help an old lady across the street, you want to do right. Most people have that, at least that concept of what doing right and wrong. Huh?
Yes. And you have more compassion because
Right.
you have the heart of the Father, right?
Right. You have almost that conscience inside that says, this is right, this is wrong, So in order for the other side to get their way and to get you into going in the opposite direction of God and all that is of him, they have to seduce you in a lot of ways. So that's why paganism, in ways, they try to pass themselves off as so, neutral. You've heard of the yin and the yang, I mean, you've heard of, white magic, black magic. You
Yes.
think about it. What they're trying to say there in those concepts, they're trying to say, okay, they're using all the same stuff. They're using all the same worldly things around us, but they're just, their intent is bad. That's all. It's not the stuff that they're using is bad or can drag you down. It's just that their intent is bad, and they're using black magic instead of white magic. So white magic can be used for good, but you're having a pentagram that's standing up, not upside down, but you're still using something that's the opposite of God, right? So that's what I'm saying. It's getting you to use things that are not of God or not of the realm that he would want you to be using things. And that's how another way of you falling is to be able to just say, okay, well, I hold on to these good luck charms. I have this, I say these chants over and over again. That should help me, blah, blah, blah. That's all pagan, and that's all of this world. And that's how they get you. And in one way is to just start and using a few things that aren't of God, and then you start to fall farther and farther away from him.
Yes, just like that frog in the pot of water on the stove, right? Yeah.
Right. So that's basically, again, I think the more that I would research this, the more I would start to find actual parallels and find evidence that, okay, these pagan gods that they worship, etc., and since they're not neutral, whatever, they do seem to correspond to maybe something biblical. Okay, we will start to hear a lot, not only about water, but we'll start to hear a lot about how they were gods of like the earth and irrigation, especially. Even though that's water, it's a special kind of irrigating and a special kind of treatment and use for water that is interesting, because if you think about it, it starts to expand our knowledge and understanding of what happened at the Garden of Eden before and after. Okay, because if you do a little research on the plains out there in Mesopotamia, there was times where there was flooding and etc., and they needed to find ways to either stop the flooding from happening and ruining their crops, or just finding ways to irrigate the water properly so they can get crops. So that's a lot of these gods would be turned into that. And I believe, again, that's kind of the way of the garden. It used to be a garden there, and Adam was probably taught how to do this, and he expanded upon into the serpent, etc. And they had a lot of this knowledge on how to work the water. But then that's how you get these corresponding elements of these pagan gods, because again, it has to do with the Garden of Eden. You start to get those links, and that makes sense.
Right. No, that makes total sense.
So next one we get into is, again, we did talk about Adam kind of being a little wayward. So that's where I believe that obviously Cain's father, the serpent, had to kind of take a step into the top spot. Okay. It wasn't always that it was always Adam, or it wasn't always the serpent, but we do have a tale of, we have two fathers here. Okay. Two father gods. Okay. One basically kind of had to, for the sake of paganism, because obviously you're not going to believe the God that Adam kept looking up to. You're going to believe the pagan god, the serpent, right? So that's how he basically, in my research, and again, everybody doesn't have to believe with me, whatever, but again, I start looking at some of these gods, like the Sumerian Enlil. Okay, we've got Enlil. We got another, that's a very famous god. Okay, and some of the characteristics, according to my research, I found about this particular god, and I believe that, again, this was an ancient Babylonian or Sumerian name for the serpent himself, who just basically had to take over the reins of Adam, the disgraced Adam here. He was called Lord of the Lands or Lord of the Earth. And again, we think about it, Lord of the Lands, maybe he was basically another manager like under Adam, but of course of the garden, because you got him working the lands, understanding the lands, and knowing about the lands. Okay. Another quote I have saying, the god Enlil's realm was the earth, as well as the spheres of winds and weather above it. So because of this, he was also known as Lord of the Wind or Air. That's an interesting quote about Enlil. Okay. Enlil, because if we think about it, who's the prince and power of the air?
Yes, I was thinking that same connection. Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Powers of the air. What does that mean? And who is that?
Yeah, who is that? Most of us who read the Bible know that, but again, so subtle, subtle.
very.
They want to introduce things to you and hope that you don't make those connections, right?
Right.
But
Exactly.
again, it does make sense if you link the serpent with this particular god Enlil, that makes total sense, because
Mhm.
again, the serpent, Satan, etc. It's basically that falls lockstep here. Okay. And then we
Yes.
also have Enlil as the Lord of the Command. And what this means likely is Enlil was leader or chief over others. And again, what I've tried to talk about in my books and the volumes is that Adam was the top viceroy under God, and obviously, but he had there was a lot of people, etc., working in the garden, and he had the serpent as one of his superiors, subordinates. You know what I mean? He was working underneath Adam, but so that's why he was still considered a manager too. And then after the fall, of course, a lot of people are starting to turn into pagan ways. Who takes up the role as the new viceroy of the land would be the serpent, of course. Okay.
Right.
The god is also known as the Lord of cultivation, and another source describes him as the splendid serpent of the shining eyes. So again, you get another source that describes him as a serpent. So interesting.
Wow.
In the Akkadian tongue, we also have the god Sin, S-I-N, or Suen, S-U-E-N. Okay. And also in the Sumerian tongue, the same equivalent, we have Nana or Nanar. Okay. So some of these characteristics of these particular gods, in the same, again, different areas, but another father god. Okay, one was thought to have been born of Enlil, which is sin, and interesting. We could actually believe that one was called the Suen god was called the knowledge lord, and if we think about it, when we have knowledge and we think about the story of the garden in the fall, we think, who was the one that supposedly gave, and this would be according to paganism now, because remember, it's the opposite. Who would be the one that gave Adam and Eve, the two mother and father gods, knowledge of this world? Obviously, it was the serpent, right?
Yeah.
So the serpent can be considered a knowledge lord, a knowledge god, because he's the one that brought fallen knowledge, as it may be, but he still brought knowledge to this world in a corrupted way, right? So they're given, and instead of cursing the serpent and saying, how could you seduce Eve and how could you help trick her, etc., they're doing the opposite. They're accrediting him for giving Eve and mankind knowledge. So again, it's totally the opposite, and they're totally twisting it around so they get all the glory.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I'm looking here at your book too, Brett. I really appreciate the illustrations that you've included with this ancient artwork, so you can get an idea of the symbology as well. I mean, you see the moon right there, the 8-pointed star of Ishtar is what I call it, which I think is probably also Inanna's star,
Yeah.
all over the place. And I've recently been studying, I was an art major in college, so I went through all these art history classes, had to look at all these paintings, memorize all different artists and everything. And lately I've kind of gone back to that and been looking at particularly Roman Catholic artwork in the church. And it's crazy because all these symbologies, like the symbols that we see on these ancient Sumerian and Babylonian depictions here in your book are very similar to what they have in their paintings. It's really, I can't believe I didn't see that before, but unless your eyes are open and you know their symbology, like we were saying earlier, to know your enemy, you're not going to recognize it.
Right. I totally agree with you, Lisa. I totally agree. It's sad, but again, know thy enemy. And again, I'm not saying anything negative about the well-meaning people of whatever faith, because I believe practically all faiths are corrupted. Christianity and Catholicism especially, because they're the ones who aren't outright pagans and saying we're pagans, we're loving it. They're the ones who a lot of times, and again, it's not the people, not the well-wishing people who are just trying to live their lives according to what they're taught.
Yes.
It's the people it's the corrupt ones at the top who know better.
The leadership. Yeah.
The leadership, right? And some of those things are the ones that we're, that we want to think and look out for and understand, just like you said, because again, remember the Romans used to be pagan big time, right? And they
Yes.
tried to persecute Christians, and they found it wasn't working. So what would they have to do but to incorporate Christianity into their former pagan religion, and then add a few, subtract a few, so that way it's because again, remember how we talked at the beginning of this past hour here is Satan and the other side would have to mock and imitate Jesus's death, burial, and resurrection already back with Tammuz, with Abel. Remember, we talked
Yes.
about that. So they already had the parallel in place way back with Tammuz, that there would have to be a dying god like Tammuz weeping for him, and he would eventually spiritually come back and revive, and then be able to help that journey and understand that journey of reincarnation back up to a god. Okay, just like it's symbolized in the changing of the seasons. Remember, we talked about spring having with this Easter egg, the eggs coming back again, reincarnating. That was kind of like that, the mimic of Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection again.
Mhm.
So when the Catholicism was being born, and again, it's not the Catholic people, it's some of these corrupt Roman leaders, the pagan leaders, they were thinking, hey, we already got that way back in early, we have so many dying and reborn gods back here in paganism. Let's incorporate Jesus and that whole story as this whole thing. We'll just substitute some names or some stories. So again, it was a hard sell. How can they wanted to be able to keep their old patrons and their pagan patrons who were, some got stubborn, and we don't want to give up this, our religion for this Jesus and this Christianity and this whole thought. So they're okay, now you could still worship some of these gods, as patron saints now, etc. And as you were saying, Lisa, there's a lot of interesting elements in how the pagan empire was changed into a church. It's just interesting because you see a lot of that same. And again, it's not the people. It's just that they needed to do that to kind of keep a lot of people that in the empire from totally getting upset with this change, right?
Yeah. It's just and it's still going on today. And when it's horrible. I mean, I've tried to talk to so many friends who have like children and still go to the church, still participate in all the pagan holidays and everything, and their excuse is, oh, but we have to do it for our kids. And I'm thinking inside, no, you don't want to do that for your kids, because then they're going to continue it on when they get older it's just the cycle is going to just continue, because Satan does make it really enticing, especially for children. They have hunting for Easter eggs, they have all the candy, of course. I mean, it seems like sugar is heavily incorporated in every single pagan holiday to make it more attractive for children, I think. They have like all the candy at Easter, they have all the sweets and all the candy again at Christmas. Of course, hopefully Halloween would be more obvious to people in the church, but even they twist that around. They still celebrate, they just call it something else. So
right.
But it's heavily incorporated.
Yeah, and that's by design. And again, Protestants, they started out, some of them started out wholesome. We see there's a lot of paganism in here. It's not going the right direction of God, and then they get corrupted. Over time they say, well, we can't say certain things, or we don't want to believe this, and then they become politically correct and they get corrupted, and they their faith, their thoughts, their teachings just fall by the wayside as well. I mean, and then the people are the ones who suffer because they're trying to do right, and they're losing. Everything gets diluted, and they're losing touch with God, and they don't know which way is up anymore. And they're stuck in that between fear and faith, or they don't have that foundation no more, because it's being taken away for the sake of not wanting to offend anybody, or trying to mesh with the political ideologies and theologies of the surroundings around you. You can't.
Yeah. And growing up in church myself and attending churches, in buildings up until maybe about 10 years ago, there are, like you said, there are good people in the churches. They've gotten caught up in the whole tradition, either through their families or maybe friends invited them, and it's kind of more like a social club for them, and they really feel like they're serving the Most High by being involved. But like you said, they're wondering at the same time, why does it feel like the more they participate in church activities or go to church services, that their faith is getting less instead of stronger.
Yep.
So there's that paradigm also. I felt the same way too. Like it just seemed like the more time that I spent over at the church, and I used to be heavily, heavily involved, like at the church almost every single day, except maybe one day of the week I'd be there, because I was in a youth group leader. I was in the praise and worship team. I played the piano for 3 different services throughout the week. Plus, then we had to go for practice. It's just like they had chapel services. I'd show up to play the music for that. I felt like I was slowly spending more time there than even in my own home. So, and I think I had friends that were in the same situation. That was like their entire life, but it got to the point where it just felt like there's a lot of things missing, and that's something the church doesn't teach, to describe what that means to have a personal relationship with Yeshua, or a personal relationship with the Most High. What does that actually mean? That means spending a lot of time one-on-one, not like in the building serving and playing music, which is all great, but it should not be your first priority.
Yeah, I found that too. I tried to be in that too, and I just was missing that foundation that wasn't there. It was just like, okay, I could sing sermons, but I'm kind of getting sick of singing singing hymns, For the first half hour, I'm like, okay, I mean, it's great to sing it, but I mean, I want to get some meat here. I want to get some solid food, and I'm going through the rigmarole of listening to music and this and that, and I want to get something out of it. And you just really, it was going away. So I had to kind of go off and kind of just research on my own. And I think it's better that way. Because unless it was, everybody was really down hard, but I think over the times, especially over the last 20, 30 years, just the dilution of everything is just unbelievable. It's very sad.
Yeah, it is. It is a very strong delusion. I think it is part of that, maybe for the end times, as they're setting up the church for the beast system,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The man-based and the man-interpreted system of God. That's basically what they're trying to do, is try to, turn it into something like that, which is sad.
Right.
Anyhow, getting back, okay, now we're going to basically get into a couple more. The Akkadian Bel, B-E-L, that we talked about earlier, and Baal, B-A-A-L. Okay, and again, these are the ones we just talked about. A lot of them, it simply means Lord. Okay, and one source that I found in my research says that Bel again was equated with Enlil again, and he, like Enlil, was called Lord of the Lands. And again, we think about the garden right there. Okay, we also find that the Bel can mean chief of the gods. Again, another chief, another viceroy that took over after Adam was, according to them, he was shamed and, didn't know where he was going, wayward son.
Mm-hmm.
Another ancient Greek scholar, I think his name was Hesychios, considered him a dragon or a great serpent. And Bel was widely known to be a dragon. So it's interesting. And there is actually an ancient Babylonian text called Bel and the Dragon, I think it was called.
Yes, that's that's in the Apocrypha, actually.
Oh, yeah. I remember that. I didn't read it though. Did you read it? I mean, does it say anything revealing, or?
Oh yes, good.
Fascinating story. You got to read it. It's about Daniel. It's actually used to be part of the book of Daniel. So really? It's a great read. Yeah.
But we have other gods that tie into the serpent. And again, we have Amalek. We've heard about Amalek, and I think I might have talked a little bit about Moloch. Basically, beyond being a grandson of I think Esau, there was an Amalek that was even before this grandson was born. And I believe that that's basically another name for the serpent. And ancient texts actually equate this Amalek with the serpent. And you've heard of Molech, Molech, the babies being sacrificed to Molech. It's just another name for Amalek, a Molech, Amalek, so we got pretty much, there you go, another sacrificing your children for the serpent. Again, that's when it all boils down to this twist in the Babylonian take on what the story of the Garden of Eden was into the pagan religion. Again, that's why you have so many of these deities kind of all coming back to that great, quote, father god, the serpent, taking over for Adam as the father.
Wow.
Next, we do have some equivalents of Eve now because again, remember I was talking about that, of course, Cain's mother was Eve, regardless, he knew that for sure. And she did lament. She did really care for him, obviously, like any mother would. So why not make a deity out of her, right? Just like he did everyone else, And again, the essence of paganism is ancestor worship. If you think about it, that's all they talk about is ancestor worship. And who were the first primordial ancestors? The original ancestors were Adam, Eve, the serpent, and Cain. So if you think about it, that's just falls right in line here. So, they do expand on Eve a little more in pagan thought, obviously, and they do expand on the feminine a little more here, obviously, because we do talk about, we have Jesus and we have God in more of a masculine form. We have Sophia, and Zen knows, an unbelievable amount about that part of it, So it takes, I believe, it kind of more corresponds maybe with the Holy Spirit, with the church itself as the bride of Christ, So you do have that concept in Christian thought, but in the pagan thought, they went right out and made a goddess, a deity, a female, and they're not, that's fine. They just made it out because Eve was the mother of Cain. So again, as far as ancestor worship, they had to make a female goddess. Okay. And there are a lot of female goddesses out there that do have some kind of connection, I believe, to actually the original ancestor Eve. What do you guys think about that? What's your thoughts? Is Zen around? Maybe Zen can give me a little thought. I'd like to hear from him about
He's
that.
kicking back and relaxing.
Okay.
No, I hear what you're saying. There are many extrapolations of who Eve is, or the mother of mankind. So and like anything else, it can be deified. It can be mysticized. It can be made into a legend. But for the most part, again, you have to go back to the biblical roots, because this is where Eve actually comes from. This is from Scripture itself, right?
Right. And it's interesting, like I said, you have to kind of, when you look at these texts and you look at these ancient pagan ideals, you just have to take them with an idea of, and I hate to say grain of salt, but you have to kind of take them with an idea of, okay, I'm getting knowledge or whatever, I'm getting possible links or whatever, but you have to kind of watch out again where they direct you, So Berosus is another Babylonian historian and actual priest, a pagan priest, and he wrote a lot, okay, but not, I think only a few exist, few pieces of material exist today. But anyhow, he wrote a little bit about a god or a deity, Oansis, okay, Oansis. And again, here's a quote from something that he wrote. It says, "At Babylon, a great resort of people existed of various nations who inhabited Chaldea and lived without rule and order." Now, I believe that he's actually talking about after the garden, after the fall, okay? So there was, because one thing I like about learning these other, even the pagan elements and stories, is they help to possibly form what could be an actual story of what happened after the fall and how they lived. Because we do hear in the Bible about, some sons of Cain and sons of Seth and etc. and that, but we don't really hear a lot about everybody else and how they were living, like the Akkadians and Sumerians, etc. So these texts kind of give us thoughts of what might have actually occurred. Like, where did the serpent go after the fall? He didn't just sit there. He was still, beloved by a lot of pagans and people out there, you know what I mean, as someone special, because he had all this knowledge, and supposedly he taught, just like the fallen angels taught a lot of the people a lot of this forbidden knowledge and stuff. And I'm sure a lot of the Nephilim, etc., had knowledge that they were taught too, because they were deified after a while. Don't you guys agree with that?
Yes, totally agree.
Okay.
They had to have someone teaching them all this knowledge, because it wasn't something that was coming from Adam or from the Most High. Right.
Yeah, people had to learn, and I'm sure sometime Adam was taught stuff too, but so that's where it gets a little murky, because you're trying to think, okay, with all this knowledge, who taught what, who taught Adam, and what are we supposed to know? Then again, it gets murky for us to know exactly what we should know, which herbs so we understand are good and etc. and that type of thing. It gets a little murky, and that's how they like it. They like to murk it up.
Yeah, and in my opinion, Adam was taught by it's mentioned in the Bible, he walked with
there was
the
an angel, right?
Well, also with the word of the Most High, that was Yeshua walking in the garden in the cool of the day before the fall. He taught him all the different ways, and you go back to the Aramaic and you realize that when it said God walked with Adam, in the cool of the day in the garden, you look at that word, and it's actually the word, which is Yeshua. So I think
really?
that's cool. Yeah, his son.
That's awesome. I didn't know that. That's like in the beginning was the Word, and Word was with God, and the Word was God, right?
Yes, exactly. And Justin's written an entire book on this where he's went into called the Hidden Memra, which is word in Greek. And so he's used the book that he wrote to just expose all that, and the thousands of times that has been mistranslated in our English translations, and that the word Yeshua is present through the entire whole Old Testament. It's really amazing.
Oh man. Now, yeah, see, that's the thing that's amazing is, and I hate to say it, but again, I mean, I used to like the King James version and etc. But
I did too.
Right, the more you research, the more you find out that it's word games, word play. Even in that version, it's just like, man, and you have to, and I guarantee Noble would know way more about Hebrew than I would. But Hebrew, I mean, Noble, isn't there so much mistranslation or politically expedient translations in these modern versions?
Oh gosh,
it's just
Noble's been teaching a series on this. It's a great question.
7-part series on it already.
Which Bible should we use?
It's disheartening.
No, but every modern day Bible, the Old Testament is based upon the Leningrad Codex, which is a masoretic text, and the Masoretes have again manipulated and doctored the rabbis. The rabbinical system has manipulated the Old Testament to pretty much extract or to defeat any talks of Messiah or the Messiah, especially when it relates to Yeshua, because the early Christians that were reading the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew text, they believed that they said, "Wow, look at this! Everything points to Yeshua," especially from the prophet Isaiah and Zechariah and all that. And in the Masoretic texts, in the modern day Bibles, when you read New Testament, in the New Testament, a lot of them goes back and uses Old Testament references, and a lot of times when you read the actual Old Testament reference, it looks different from what the New Testament is translating it as. Why is there a difference? Same text. And when you go back to the Old Testament and understand that modern day Bibles are affected by the fact that they are based upon the Masoretic text, the corrupted Masoretic text that started from Rabbi Akiva in the 1st century AD onward, and it's just been a downhill plunge from them. So
it's all about power. It's all about maintaining
it's all about
their
control.
hold, their pre-Jesus hold over the populace. That's what it's about. And again. I was going to say this earlier, but it's amazing how, if you look and study a little, you'll see, and I'm sure you probably even know, but Jesus and Paul especially, but Jesus especially, just pointing them out, hypocrites, and especially about holding on to the traditions of men, and that's what they established. So that's how you got the Talmud, and you got these books, the Mishnahs, and all these, again, the traditions and the interpretations of the rabbis, not that saying that they're not bad in this and that, but when they start to hold them over the Torah and the Bible, then you start to question, you think, okay, what is this? Is the traditions of men more than God here and more than anything else here? And that's probably what you're talking about, Nobles, where they tried to just say, okay, well, Jesus can't be the fulfillment of Messiah because that would disrupt our power.
Well, they tried to incorporate the oral tradition. They say it came from Moses or Moshe as an oral tradition that was never written down, but it was conveyed to Moshe from God. And that's not true. That is not true. So yeah, like you said, they came up with the Mishnah. The Mishnah was followed by the Tanaim. The Tanaim was followed by the Gemara, and the Gemara was followed by the Tofsera, I believe, and then all of that, and then you put them all together, and it equates to the Talmud, which is pretty much the encompassing of all of those previous writings from so-called, Sophia or Sopharim. This is how can I say this? A continuation of man's tradition and trying to make it a part of the Torah, which it could never really be. But again, like I said, when Rabbi Akiva and his crew started to, what did they do? They got the Alexandrian Septuagint. They said, give me all your Alexandrian Septuagints. We'll replace it with our Septuagint because our Septuagints are better than the Alexandrian, which was not so because it was rabbinically incorporated and corrupted. And again, we all know that it was the rabbis that were against Jesus in the first place. So why would you ever want to have a Bible that had something that has rabbinic overtones? So when you got your modern day Bible, beware when you read it.
Beware.
Well, like you were saying, Brett, even King James, like that was like their government issued Bible that they pulled all of the other Bibles people were reading, especially out of the church, and made it mandatory to only read that in 1611 for I don't know how many hundreds of years.
Okay, so think about it this way: if Hasatan is supernatural, divine, right, and he's been given thousands of years to corrupt mankind, and he can also be given all that time to corrupt the Word of God. Think about it. Why wouldn't it be corrupted? That people rely on it to know God, and yet, what better way to thwart their desire to know God? By messing up what's written in the Bible.
Taking out the Word of God.
Taking it out, changing it, modifying it. I mean, it's much like the Jehovah's Witnesses when they came out with their New World Translation, the NWT. They made that Bible fit their theology.
With his particular verse in John 1, verses 1 to 4. They changed that.
So again, everything can be manipulated and everything can be doctored. And when you think about it, geez, that's why God wants us to search out his word, to really seek him and understand what's going on. So now when we read the Old Testament in our modern day Bibles, I would suggest, why don't we read it with the Septuagint, the English translation of the Septuagint, and I say the Alexandrian Septuagint, because there are other so-called Septuagints that have kind of taken the name, but they really are not the original Septuagint. And then now you can match up the Masoretic text, Old Testament, with the Septuagint translation of the Old Testament, and you will see a difference. You will see quite a few differences.
So the Alexandria Septuagint is the better, you're saying?
That's the one you want to get. That's the one that was Ptolemy II. Remember when Alexander the Great conquered the empire? I mean, he had his empire covering all the Middle East and Asia. And when he died, his 4 generals took over. Ptolemy was the one that got the Middle East area. His son, Ptolemy II, built the Alexandrian library. He was a man of knowledge and wisdom, because the Greeks were into Sophia, wisdom, right? And so he wanted to have the Torah translated into the Greek, because that was the
language of the day.
The language that was a common language back then. It says you guys need to know Greek. This is the common language to do commerce, to do business, to do everything, And so Ptolemy said, "Yep, give me that." And there's a legend that says 70 Jewish historians came together and translated the Hebrew Old Testament, the original, not the autograph, but a very old copy that was pretty reliable and not corrupted yet by the Masoretes. And they translated it, and the Septuagint was brought out, the Alexandrian Septuagint, or also known as the LXX. And now, with that, you can actually get a better rendition of what the Old Testament really read like compared to your modern day Bibles.
One last question to you is, what did Strong use? Strong's Concordance?
Yeah, Strong's
Strong letters?
Yeah. There are a lot of concordances out there. Strong is a very popular one. So I would be cautious. There are other not as popular ones.
Brown drivers,
Biggs, BDB, Biggs drivers, and Brown driver big. Yeah. There's other ones, but
something we noticed with the Strongs lately, though, because we have paper copies, of course, from Noble seminary days, my Bible college days back, 30, 40 years ago. And we noticed that digitally, the Strong's has changed a bit. So that's what I think we mean when just be a little bit careful and,
Really?
and compare the different concordances. Because like Noble said, there's 3 or 4 of them you can compare with. If you go in one of the apps like Bible Hub or some of those other ones, that they'll list 3 or 4 different concordances. So just kind of check it out and make sure that they're all in agreement, or the parts that are in agreement, those are usually the parts that we would say, like 2 or 3 witnesses, that's where you find the truth.
And the strong numbers, are they come with where does they base the numbers on?
I don't know.
Just curious, because I use strong numbers. I try to.
Have you done it? I haven't done research on that, Brett, at all. Have you done any research on that, hon? Where did they get the numbers from in Strong's?
No, I need to actually look into
I haven't. That's a good question.
Hey, Brett, let me give you an example. Okay, if people were to open up their Old Testament to Genesis chapter 4, verse 13. Okay, this is again when God was asking Cain, "Hey, where's Abel? What are you talking about? Am I his keeper?" And then God told him, "Hey, look, I know what you did. Okay, here's what verse 13 says in the modern day Bible on the Old Testament. Cain said to the Lord, 'My punishment is greater than I can bear.'" Okay, verse 13. Here's the Alexandrian Septuagint. Cain said to the Lord, "My guilt is too great for me to be forgiven."
That's a different one.
You know what?
Have you read that before?
Now, when you listen to this, okay, and what our modern day Bibles say, well, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Let me ask you this: was God ever one to bring punishment on a person alive because of a sin that he had committed? When you think about it, God says, "I can forgive every sin, except for the sin of not accepting my son, Yeshua HaMashiach, as your Lord and Savior." So Cain killed his brother Abel. He should be actually able to be forgiven for that by God. But yet it says here, "My punishment is greater than I can bear." And this is Cain talking to the Lord. But now when you read the Septuagint version, and he says, "My guilt is too great for me to be forgiven." See, now Cain is saying, "God, what I did is grossly sinful. It's so bad. There's no way you could forgive me." And this is where God comes in and says, "Yes, I can. I can forgive you." Now, doesn't that sound like the God that we know versus the God that says, "No, I can't forgive you for that"?
Yeah.
So the big difference between the two, and this is just one of the many passages that are totally different from one another in the Old Testament.
Yeah, I definitely agree to just do your research too. Do your research about, don't just and I'm not saying you too, I'm just talking about people in general. Just do your independent research about texts and verses in the Bible. Even just don't rely on one modern interpretation and translation and say this is it, because again, remember, it's not in the original text. It's been translated, and with translations, a lot of people like to put their own opinions in, a lot of their own thoughts in, right? So I think that the Holy Spirit will guide you, and again, that's what the gift of discernment is. You will be able to start to see, okay, does it ultimately head me? What I'm thinking here, does it head me into something of like a merciful God that from what I've heard about, or does that start to direct me into something that's not a merciful God and something that doesn't seem right? You'll be able to see that. You'll be able to understand.
Exactly. Well, what does God say? "I desire mercy, not sacrifice." Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So
right.
Again, when you think about it, he's a loving God, and all he wants is your loyalty. He wants your undivided loyalty, and that would be the one to do, is to say, "Lord, I love you. I make mistakes. I'm probably they're so bad that can't be forgiven, but God, I know you can't forgive them. Thank you again."
We have a really quick question in the chat for Noble, real fast, Brett. I'm sorry. We'll get back to your book right after this. Okay. Sherry is asking, Noble, would that possibly have something to do with Cain's remorse for killing Abel?
I don't think Cain.
You just read. I don't think it was remorseful.
I don't think Cain was very remorseful, but he was just saying that because he was belligerent. I mean, he was rejected for his offering to God, and he saw Abel or Abel get the blessing, in a sense, get the favor of God, and again, being from a totally different patriarchal lineage, you could see that maybe it was a totally different attitude and mindset he had.
Mm-hmm.
And so, was he remorseful? I don't think
No.
so, but he said it like, "There's no way you can forgive me for this." You know what I mean?
I'm so guilty.
Or-
I'm so guilty.
Yeah.
Or could he have been asking God a question? Could he have been saying, "What? Don't you think this sin is enough to be forgiven? Couldn't I? You don't think you can forgive me ever for this sin?" Could he be
No.
that cocky and that arrogant to think that asking God a question? That's enough. I mean, that was something in the research that I've done over the years. Could he be asking? Because look at his character. Could he be asking God? I mean, come on, you can't even excuse this sin, really? And you're God?
Yeah, and God would probably say, "Yeah, if you had the right attitude,
I can do it.
if you had the right
Maybe
attitude,
I
I
won't
would."
this
But
time.
it doesn't seem like you have the really remorseful, right heart, that condition that is required to be forgiven. Because
Right.
even the mass murderer can say, "I won't do it again. I promise." And,
Right.
right.
If you were truly, it's like testing God. If you were truly God, you'd forgive me for this, right? Because you're merciful
Yeah.
enough. I gave you the best
Exactly.
of my fruits, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, and God can see to the heart. We cannot, but God can. But
Right.
Cain, he was pretty bold, in what he did and how he was actually responding to God's questions about what he did with his brother Abel. And that's just it just seems like it was very
Deliberate.
yeah,
Yeah.
very deliberate, not remorseful, not sorry in the slightest bit, but just again very, very determined to get his way, to do things kind of like children today. I want it my way or else.
Well, Cain was even more so because you have to look at who his father was.
Yeah.
He was behaving just like his father would have.
Yeah. Imagine a lot of pride there, right? A lot of the same type of pride. And he probably had a personal, I mean, imagine he was talking to God, just like,
Yeah, I know.
Adam and Abel. They were able
Yeah.
to talk to God. So imagine that. It's not like, they haven't seen him before, or not seen him, but haven't, communicated before. It's like you're actually talking to him.
But you got to remember now, also, when you go back into the history, when God announced to his divine council, "I'm going to make a new family. They're going to be called humans." Okay, they're not going to be as powerful or as gifted as you, divine beings. You know what I'm saying? But they are going to be made in my image. And some of the angels says, "Yeah, go for it, God. We're with you." Some others says, "No, that is not acceptable." Especially, what did you say also? That one day they'll be ruling over us. The inferior will be ruling over us, the
Yeah.
superior. And Hasatan, Nakash, all those that rebelled against God, the Watchers, they probably says, "No, I don't agree. This is not part of the program I signed up for." Well, I'm sorry. When God says something, that's the program.
That's absolutely correct, in my opinion. I believe they were the first racists, if you call them superior,
Yes.
supremacist. I believe,
Oh yeah.
and they will push everybody else as supremacists or whatever to twist that accusation. But they were the first supremacists out there. They're not
yeah.
going to worship a man, or not worship, but serve under a man of dust, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I've mentioned, I think I've talked about before, is dust is considered humiliation, but God was using that to give Adam a sense of humility. It wasn't to make
Yes.
him look like he's a crumb bum or anything. He was just trying to say, through Adam's thoughts of humility and reverence towards me, that'll be the next pattern of which this new world that I'm bringing out will be under.
You
Does that make
remember
sense?
that? Yeah, it does make very much sense. Remember when terrorists are raising their children, they teach their children to hate Jews and hate Americans, to kill, and hate them. Well, what more when you have Hasatan, telling his own children, "Hey, you know what? Do not put up with these humans." You know what I mean? They're not like us. They're inferior to us, and
Mhm.
we are their superior. We would never bow down to them, never serve them. So our goal here is to kill them. You know what I mean? to dispose of them because they're not who we are.
Or make
And
them
again,
serve you, or make them
Yeah.
serve you as
Or make them
gods,
serve-
which they did.
which they did, yeah, which they're doing right now, right? So
Mhm.
so yeah, so again, it's a battle. It's a what do you call it? Species battle. It's a differing species.
Bloodline battle.
Well, bloodline is one way to say, but they're two totally different species. Angelic or divine versus human. You know, it's just
Yeah.
two different species. That's all it is. You know,
Yep. A lot of pride. A lot of pride goes into that.
a lot of hate, yeah. And you know, it's funny because they see God, they get to hear God, they're in the presence of God, and they're not fearful of rebelling against Him. Idiots. We thought humans are stupid. They're even more stupid, you know. So,
Well, I think obviously, I think they know their future's ahead of them, and I think it's in the darkness of the deep and the eventual judgment. So they're
Yeah.
going to do whatever they can, because again, misery loves company. They're going to try to do whatever they can to bring as many of this weakling, inferior humans down with them as they could, because they'll feel better, right? If they at least a little bit better.
yeah, and it'll be temporal. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they're feeling what they. Okay, I'm good. We got about 7 billion of them. That's still not enough. You know, like people chasing after money. When do you stop seeking money? Oh, after the first million. And when you get the first million, are you going to stop now? No, I'm going to get 1 more million, and you just keep
Yeah.
going and going. And nobody's ever satisfied, right?
One of the Rockefellers, I think it said when would be enough money, and he said after the next dollar, or he said something like that. In other
Something like
words,
that.
it'll never end.
Yeah, it'll never end. And so you look at the mentality of the rebellious divine beings, and their mentality is, yeah, let's take as many people as we can with us, because you know what? If we're doomed, they're coming with us, because you know what? We didn't like them in the first place. We thought this was God's blunder idea, and we don't agree with him. So we're going to take all of as much of his creation as we can. Yeah, and that's part of the plan, because you know why? Humans themselves have the opportunity to avoid Sheol. All they have to do is what? Believe in Yeshua.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And even that seems to be asking too much, you know. And so the humans that do go down to Sheol with the divine beings, in a sense, kind of deserve it, because they've been given more than enough evidence, opportunities to change their ways, to seek after their creator, their provider. But you know, the evil one has been able to thwart them and distract them, and to disguise the goal of mankind, you know, and seeking God is not the priority anymore. So that's what it
Yeah.
boils down to. Yeah.
That's what I seen a like a vampire movie one time, which is interesting. But the one guy said he's a vampire, and he said this to a person. He says, "I'm going to give you what I don't have. It's a choice." And that's interesting, because they no longer have a choice in this existence, whatever existence that they're in, whether it be, you know, partly this, partly theirs.
Yeah.
They no longer have a choice, and that's sad, but that's what it is. Okay.
Yeah, because they made their decision. Yeah. And that's what happens with the divine beings that rebelled. They don't have an opportunity for salvation, because they were looking at salvation straight on in the face, you know, face to face. They were in the presence of salvation, and they said, no, that's not enough for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and that's why there is no salvation plan for them. But for humans, because we have not seen God in person, we have that redemptive opportunity to change our course, our path, and to choose Yeshua, and to live a life that's according to His, you know, commandments and His desires. And really, what does He ask? Believe in me and be loyal.
Mhm.
It's not a laundry list. It's really 2 items. So it's amazing that.
Go ahead.
Go
amazing.
ahead.
No, go ahead. It's amazing that what?
It's just amazing that people, you know, cannot accept something so simple, and they would prefer to go the other way, you know. But they're going to find out, you know, soon enough.
And that's why in the writings of these books, that's why I tend to believe and just accept that Abel may have actually also been a seed of the serpent. Abel, And the reason why, again, is because some hints in the Bible, like Adam's looking at Seth and says, "This is the first one that looks like me," or whatever. I mean, that tells me something. Tells me something. Why wasn't Abel like Adam? But that's, again, this is my take on it. But the reason why I think Abel, and I mentioned this before, but I just bring it up now, is that he's so pivotal in a lot of things, because he is talked about in the New Testament even, and the reason why he was pivotal is because even a son of the serpent can choose to follow God, like you were saying, Noble. Even the son of the serpent himself. It doesn't mean you're not destined like Cain.
Right.
Whatever. If you got that blood, you're not destined to go to Sheol and just do wrong and hate God. You're not. It's a choice, and I think that's another reason why people hated Abel so much, is because that exposes them for what they are. Abel made a choice, even with the blood of the serpent, the direct son of the serpent. He's made a choice to follow God. He chose to do the sacrifices the right way, to be a shepherd, to choose this lifestyle. And they can't make excuses anymore for saying, "Oh, God just hates me," and "Oh no, because of this situation I'm in, I'm not going to choose him. It's all God's fault." You hear around us everywhere how many people just turn and look and blame God for everything that happens or everything that goes wrong within their lives. But you got to look at personal responsibility and such. And pride will not let you look at those things or look internally, look at yourself. That's pride,
Right.
and that's why it's so deadly.
It's always easy to blame someone else than yourself.
Oh yeah, and you see that around everywhere. Just beware of those people who do not look at themselves or look in the mirror,
Self-examine
and it's
themselves,
always
yeah.
everybody else's fault and this and that. They want perfection in this world. They want it their own way. They want to get it their own way. They don't want to understand that they may not be thinking correctly, and then they may need God to help them out in this life. They want to do it all themselves, and that's the essence of paganism too.
Yeah, and it looks like we're right here at the end of the show, Brett. We look forward to having you back again in a month or so and to talk more about your book. Thank you again, Brett. Thank you for everyone in the chat. We love you all, and we'll see you all again soon.
Thank you all
Brett.
for coming. See you in a
Thanks,
month.
Justin, Zen. Thanks, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you everybody for joining us for this video and this broadcast. We appreciate all of you and thank you for your patronage. Please do like and subscribe and share with your friends. God bless all of you in your seeking.